green-skinned children rocking up in a medieval town in the 1100s. Blanche Monnier, the wealthy, beautiful woman, locked up for 25 years. Roman Emperor Caligula versus Neptune, god of the sea. The dancing plague of 1518. And the Hammersmith ghost murder. These are the odd and morbid and weird stories that we will go through today. I'm Pilvi, this is Morbid History, and without further ado, let's get into it.
Every job must be carefully analyzed.
Story 1. The Green-Skinned Children of Woolpit. One fine day, in the small town of Woolpit in England, a pair of siblings rocked up, but not any kind of siblings. They had a green tint to their skin, they wore weird clothing, and spoke gibberish. The entire town was shooketh, or so the legend says. They only ate green beans, and sadly the younger one, the boy sibling, dearly departed, not long after the aforementioned rocking up. The sister, though, survived and adjusted well into her new life. She learned English, and the green tint started disappearing as soon as she ate other things than green beans. She was seen, though, as wanton and impudent. By the locals. Beyond that, she started telling of her recollection of what happened before they came to Woolpit. Her story was that they came from a land devoid of sunlight. It was more like a twilighty light. Not a movie, but movies. Either way, this land was called St. Martin Land, and everyone and everything there were green. That was her story, and she stuck by it. Is this a folk tale, a legend, told by some as truth? Because that's fun? Or is there a natural explanation to all this? Some say that the children could have been Flemish immigrants that wandered off from their home, and that the stories about St. Martin Land and all that was just like the memories of a small child after growing up. I mean, it can get a bit foggy. Also, they could have been green because of a thing called the green sickness even back then, which was caused by a deficiency in the body from eating badly, which would explain why her skin grew up and became normal after eating normal food, not just green beans. Mayhaps. Will we ever know? Probably not. But it's fun either way, isn't it? A bit quirky, you know. Woo! Story 2. Blanche Monnier. A wealthy, beautiful socialite in France who was locked up in a dark room by herself for 25 years. It wasn't until 1901 when the authorities got a letter that stated, "Monsieur Attorney General, I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. I speak of a spinster who is locked up in Madame Monnier's house, half starved and living in a putrid litter for the past 25 years. In a word, in her own filth. As they have to, authorities busted in and found Blanche in a skeletal state. She weighed only 25 kilos. I'm gonna put it up here what that is in for people who don't know kilos, but that's very, very little. Starvation, anorexia. She was skeletal, like I already said, and she was there in her own filth, in her own excrement, waste products, old food all over her, and she was laying completely as God intended on a yucky straw mattress. The police couldn't even get into the room at first because the stench was so overpowering. They couldn't go in. Either way, they got her out of there and put her in a hospital. Her mental state wasn't good by any means. She talked like a child, if she talked at all. And wouldn't put clothes on and stuff like that. They had to shave off all of her hair because it had matted into a dirt clump. The hair clump in itself weighed almost a bit over 2 kilos, which is a lot too. There must have been things in there. Her mother was taken into custody. Also her brother, who had known about the whole thing. Mom, though, passed away after 15 days. The son, Marcel, the brother of Blanche, he got a 15-year prison sentence. That was the harshest sentence they could give him. Blanche lived out her life at a psychiatric hospital where she was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, schizophrenia, and exhibitionism. She liked to be at her natural state. But what led to this point? Some accounts say that Blanche, who was born in 1849 into a very well-to-do family, a socialite, they were wealthy, she was beautiful and gained a lot of attention. Then, at the age of 25, she decided to tell her parents that she was in love with a lawyer, which made her mother extremely angry because of the penniless lawyer or peasant lawyer, as different accounts state that she called him. They had a big old row and the mother locked Blanche into a room, saying that she would let her out when she gave up on the whole idea of marrying the lawyer man, which she never did, and therefore Blanche just never came out. That's one story. Other stories state that Blanche had been experiencing signs of mental unwellness around that time, 25-ish. Early signs of schizophrenia, we would call it today, and that her mother just put her in a room instead of sending her to an asylum, which would have been bad for Blanche, she thought, or it would tarnish the family reputation. Some sources also even state that it was Blanche herself that did not want to leave her room or clean her room and wanted to be there in entire darkness. and that her family just didn't know how to deal with it. Either way, Blanche passed away in 1913, still in that psychiatric hospital. Which of these explanations or stories do you think rings most true? Please let me know down below. I'm super curious. Dear friends, please consider just like giving the little like button a nice pat and maybe hitting the subscribe button because it does really help the channel a lot. Boost the algorithm, and I promise you, it doesn't hurt. And now, number 3. That one time Emperor Caligula decided to wage war with his entire army against the sea and the god Neptune. Yep, one fine day, he took his his army in full armor, in full fight mode, and marched them down to a beach, where he started stabbing at the waves and instructed his men to do the same. Then they had to collect seashells as bounty trophies of their great victory? I don't know. Why? You might ask yourself. Well, there's many theories. 1. Personal slight. He felt that the god Neptune and the sea, ocean were working against him. He had just failed an attempt to invade Britain, and Neptune could have helped more. Or just the memory of his father's failings. He wanted to vindicate him, and vengeance for sinking his father's ships way back when. Is this story even true? Scholars think no. But it's still very odd and fun. I mean, Caligula was known to be quite mad in so many ways. So why can't we have this one? Why can't we just say that he waged war against the water? It's a fun picture to keep in your brain vault and laugh at. Yep, that's that. Next one! Number 4. The Dancing Plague of 1518. This is a case that is often described as mass hysteria that happened in what is modern-day France. It started with one woman called Frau Trophea, who, for some reason, just started to dance, and soon a bunch of people started to dance with her. Some so much that they went straight and cancelled their live subscriptions, no refunds. It is thought that the amount of people dancing, it's been like different sources, different amounts, all from 50 to 400. Just continuous, uncontrollable dancing until demise. So yeah, was it mass hysteria caused by stress? Was it divine punishment for people being terrible? Or that they were poisoned by an extra fun fungus that was lurking in their bread called ergot? Because one of the symptoms of ergot poisoning is spasms, which is not dancing, but yeah, okay. Either way, it's still a mystery to this day why so many people just randomly decided why so many people started dancing their lives away. We'll probably never know, but what a way to go. And now our last story, number 5, the Hammersmith ghost. which turned into a murder. Sometime in 1803 in Hammersmith, London, people started claiming to have seen and even being attacked by a white-clad ghost. The ghost being dressed in a white shroud wouldn't have been weird then, because customary burial clothing was more or less a white shroud that looked like a night dress, stuff like that. So either way, them being under a white sheet and stuff, that was expected for ghosts. Either way, it was safe to say that the locals of Hammersmith were in deep ghost mania. They thought that the ghost was a man who had self-cancelled the year prior and was buried in the Hammersmith churchyard, and there could not get rest because self-cancellers can't be buried in consecrated ground. And thus he would be roaming about, scaring everyone. Many of these sightings, probably pranks, people under sheets doing their thing. Until one night, when tragedy struck. An officer on night patrol, called Francis Smith, was out and about. All the officers and stuff like that, they were talking about this ghost and how they were going to catch it. He was ready if it appeared. And then he saw someone dressed entirely in white. Ooh, scary. Woo, and he shot him. Well, yeah, it was a him. He shot a man called Thomas Wood, who was a bricklayer, and his white clothing were the clothes of his trade. He had just been out walking late in the clothes he used when he was working, when the officer shot him, thinking he was a ghost. The judge and jury wasn't having it, and they sentenced him to murder and the death penalty, which was then ruled over again to life in prison. Just goes to show that you can't shoot someone who you think is a ghost. Like, what was he even gonna do with that? Can you shoot a ghost? Well, either way, it was found out later that it was a local man who had been dressing up in a sheet and was scaring some young dudes. And I'm sure some other people, once the ghost mania really started hitting off, went out and did the same thing, scaring people until someone got shot. It's all fine and dandy and fun until someone gets murdered. Yeah, let's end it with that. Ramble number 1. The glass delusion. In the 16 and 1700s, a delusion stumped doctors and physicians back then as they do today. And the main symptoms were overwhelming melancholia, sadness, and the fixed idea that they themselves were made out of fragile glass and ready to shatter at any touch, at any moment. Okay, well, I'd be scared too if I really thought that I was made out of glass. So I can't blame them there. It was thought that it was caused out of melancholia, which was, well, that's an entire video of itself with the 4 humors and stuff like that. But you were melancholy and you were feeling fragile, so why not be glass? It was only the noble and rich of Europe who were affected for some reason. Well, the reason was that glass was a very new and novel thing. And of course it was way too expensive for any old peasant to go buy some glass. No, this was new and fancy only for the noble and the rich. So of course they were the ones taking it all in, and obviously taking it too far for some. They almost saw glass when it was new as something magical, something to do with alchemy, since you have to mix different things to get to this weird new magic material. They could see themselves in mirrors in different ways, and wow, cool. Everything was new and just unexplainable to them. Books written by physicians, again, back then, tell of unnamed nobles and royals who thought a very common one was that their butts were made out of glass and that it would shatter if they went to the loo. So they didn't go, or they strapped pillows and soft materials around their bums. So that it wouldn't break when they sat down on the loo, or anywhere else for that matter. And one of these unnamed nobles mentioned in these books proudly and firmly proclaimed that he was indeed a whole glass vase. Well, either way, some famous victims to the glass delusion. We start with a king of France, Charles VI. He was, king of France. He was known as the Beloved in the beginning of his reign, but then it changed into the Mad. He was already predisposed to bouts of depression, melancholia, paranoia, and psychotic breaks and stuff. You know the things. Hallucinations. He wasn't all there, so people weren't very surprised, I guess, when he proclaimed that he was indeed made out of glass. No one could touch him or come near him, and he reinforced his clothes with metal so that they would protect him from anything that could break him. And then we have another one who was very late into all this, like in the 1800s, the Princess of Bavaria, Alexandria. She had a fun variant of the glass delusion. One day, the consorts in the royal palace found her walking very strangely, and she was walking through a door vertically like that, as to not bump into that terrible wall. The courtiers asked, "Hey, what you doing there, Alexandria?" And she proclaimed that she had just realized that when she was a child, she had swallowed an entire full-size grand piano made out of glass. And now she was afraid that anything she did would shatter it inside of her. How it remained intact from her childhood into later years, she could not explain that. So yeah, nobles way back then thought that they were made out of glass, their butts were made of glass, or they had swallowed a grand glass piano. You go into that rabbit hole if you like. Next one! Our next ramble is the world's most mysterious book. A small little piece that was apparently made sometime around 1400, and studies into it shows that it was made somewhere in Italy. But that's pretty much all we know, because it's very mysterious indeed. The book is named after a man called Wilfrid Voynich. Voynich. I don't know. Please let me know down below how to pronounce that. But he purchased and got a hold of the books or the manuscript sometime in 1912, and he studied it and tried to decipher it thoroughly. The latest known mention of the book was an alchemist in Prague in the 1600s who also tried to decipher it. There's a letter that was found where he was sending it to some minister or priest or whatever, asking for help in doing so, but no, they did not succeed. No one has been able to decipher this weird language or its weird imagery. It's 240 pages of an unknown language and fantastical, colorful drawings. It ranges, it seems like at least, from "Hi, this is I from the future, here editing as one does," and apparently I decided to go full ramble rogue in this episode and totally ignore my script like the plague, so I'm here to save myself. The book is chaptered into such themes as herbal, astronomical, balneological, cosmological, pharmaceutical, and recipes. Also, lots of ladies in their natural state, usually in some kind of strange pool, bathing. And we don't know why. Even most of the plants in the botanical section and the medical section don't correspond or correlate to any known species of plants that we know today. Someone clearly took a lot of time and effort into making it. That's for sure. Did they do it just to be confusing? Were they trying to write something down in very cryptic coding? I really want to know why some of these naked ladies are pushing their limbs into tubes. Is an entire section dedicated to plumbing with women? Well, they do seem to like the women bathing, so that would make sense. Theories are abound. There's plenty of theories. It would need an entire episode of its own. Let me know down below if you want that. Either way, it's a weird little book, and you go into that rabbit hole. It'll be fun, I promise. Next one. Hi, yes, a new outfit. Another day, another sleigh, as the kids say. Let's move on. So, the next oddity from history. Imagine surviving Titanic. That's odd. No, not really. Imagine doing that. That's what Violet Jessup did. But yeah, she survived the Titanic, which she worked on. But not only did she do that, she managed to be on Titanic's sister ships, 2 of Titanic's sister ships, when they too encountered disaster. Let's get into it. Violet Jessup, she was born in Argentina to Irish immigrant parents. The year? 1887. She was one of many children. At some point when she was in her 15, 16, they started getting the tuberculosis, as one did back then. Her father sadly passed, and she and the rest of her family moved back to Europe, specifically Britain. They moved to Britain, not Ireland, to Britain. There, her mother, or I think her mother had always worked as a stewardess, and Violet, Miss Jessup, she wanted that life too, working as a stewardess on boats. Good and dandy. It's said that she was so pretty that no one would hire her, because she would cause distraction. But she got hired to the White Star Line because she came there dressed in her worst. And it worked. She got hired. To everyone's dismay. Thing was that the White Star Line had started making these giant ships. This was the time and place for those giant cruise line ships. Everyone were very much into them. So they made big boats, pleasing the crowd. And 3 of them were the Titanic, the Olympic, and Britannic. Most people would be thrilled to get to work on these ships back then. They were the most modern and awesome thing around. So Violet did that, yeah. She was around 20 when she started on her ocean-bound tragedy. In 1911, she started working on the Olympic. When it crashed into another war vessel on a boat, a big boat, they crashed. Violet was on it. There was no fatalities, so Violet soldiered on, of course. She even continued working on the Olympic because it survived the crash and everyone survived, so no one was thinking much of that. But then she got recruited to go and work on Titanic on her maiden voyage, and we all know what happened there. Do we even need to... Many fatalities, many. But not Miss Jessup. She survived by being plopped into one of the lifeboats after helping other people because they were prioritizing the women and children. She even got a child thrown onto her as she was sitting on the lifeboat, and once they came to land, some woman she did not know ran up to her, took the child while crying and ran away, so she didn't know what happened to that baby. Hopefully that was the baby's real mother. So that was a tragedy and a half. Most people would not want to even consider life at sea after these two events. But not dear Violet. No. A few years later, she was on the Britannic. In 1916, when it boated its way into a mine. Do boats drive? It floated into a mine. Either way, there were minor casualties, this time around 30 people, and Violet was not one of them. No, she survived. Came onto land. But nearly didn't, because she had coordinated so that everyone got on the lifeboats, maybe a bit too early, and the lifeboats were in the water and were being drawn into the giant propeller thingies and were getting sucked in, so everyone had to jump off the lifeboats, and Violet did that, and she hit her head very badly, but she did indeed survive and went to dry land, and that would have been the end of it. Yes? No. She continued working. She didn't actually retire from being a stewardess until 1950, to all boat enthusiastic people's great pleasure, I could imagine. She lived well on into her 80s when she dearly departed in 1971. Either way, yeah, that's just... Okay. You go on, boat lady. Why? Someone must have thought her cursed at some point. Well, either way, they called her the unsinkable lady. Didn't anyone stop to think not to place her on a boat again? It is what it is, and that's what it was. On to the next one, and the last one. And the last one is Vampire Panic, the tragedy of Mercy Brown. In 1892, a very demised lady was taken out of her resting place, examined, and had her heart and liver ripped out, burned into ash, which was then mixed into a tonic that was given to her younger brother to ingest. Why? Vampire mania. Everyone and a half were dropping off by tuberculosis. We all know that, don't we? And sometimes medical nonsense just isn't enough. Folklore is the way to go here, of course. The thing was that Mercy Brown, who was she? Well, she was the daughter of a man, Mr. Brown, and he had sadly lost his wife and many of his children, including Mercy, to tuberculosis. Lore during this time for the folk was that if a family was presented with many demises in one family in a short time, it could only have to do with some kind of curse of the undead. They pestered the poor man who had lost almost his entire family to dig up his poor children so that they could examine them and really make sure that none of them were a vampire or an undead who came back. And Mercy's youngest brother was sick by this point, and they thought that if one of the other demised children were a vampire, they were the ones to blame, and the only way to save him was to stop the vampire. So yeah, Mr. Brown went ahead and dug up a few corpses, one of them being Mercy Brown. The others, besides Mercy, had been lying in the ground for quite a while, a few months at least in the ground. And they were satisfactory in their decomposition, I'm guessing. They were fine. Mercy, they thought, she still has blood in her organs and she doesn't look decomposed at all. She is a vampire. Thing was that she wasn't even buried. She had been demised for 2 months and she was in an vault above ground. This was winter, it was cold. She was pretty much in a freezer. That explains the lack of decomposition. But no, they decided she was coming back to life as a vampire, and they took out her heart and liver, as we said, and they burned them, mixed them into a tonic, and gave them to her younger brother, who did not survive. No, he did pass away 2 months later. Hopefully they thought it was a good choice either way. Hey, at least they did something. Number 1. Archimedes' death ray. Greek mathematician, inventor, and astronomer. Most well known for running through the streets of Syracuse screaming, "Eureka, Eureka, I got it." At least that's what the smarty-patsy historic scholars say that he did, and I will trust them. He did that. Well, after a very inspiring bath sesh. But what I didn't know, and maybe some other people have missed it, is that he invented a death ray. Yeah, destroying ships by fire. During the siege of Syracuse, which was between 212 and 213 BC, apparently Archimedes developed, well, it was basically a giant mirror or two or multiple that harnessed the warmth of the sun and could point it as a ray to enemy ships, setting them ablaze. Fun, if it happened. There's absolutely no written records of such an invention from the man himself, and everything, or all the surviving documents that we have, are from many years after it supposedly happened. Apparently he also invented a giant claw hand, aptly named the Claw of Archimedes, which was a giant hand with claws that was tied to a wall, I'm guessing the city wall, which was being attacked, and it was strapped to some kind of pulley system, I'm guessing, that it went up and down, and it was supposed to go down. When it was down there, it would take the enemy ship by the front and flip it over, yeeting all those enemies into the water. Good. Sounds fun, and I would love for it to be true. But also, yet again, we don't have much proof of that happening either. But that won't stop me from taking it as the gospel truth. Archimedes was an inventor of mass destruction. Yeah, that is what I believe in now, because that is most fun. Now, a short and sweet one. Next. Number 2. A very short little entry that I stumbled upon during research, and that is the odor of sanctity, or also called the holy smell. This is a phenomenon that has been witnessed, I guess, ever since medieval ages and before that in the Catholic Church. Yeah, it's a scent that is brain fart. It's said to be a particular sweet, flowery scent, almost like roses or lilies, coming from a body of a saint. It's both odd and a mystery, since it has indeed been experienced by plenty of people for a very, very long time. Scientists, they think that it could have to do something with, like, if you're going through ketosis, if you've starved or fasted prior to life subscription cancellation, the ketosis can make the body emit a very sweet and weird smell. So that could easily be an explanation to all that. Either way, fascinating stuff. Now, cannibals and rich people. Number 3. What happened to Michael Rockefeller? Michael Rockefeller, he was indeed a dude. No, he was a man, and he was born into one of the most prestigious and wealthy families, a dynasty of American history, the Rockefellers, of course. Michael Clark Rockefeller was born in 1938 and did as any prestigious young man from such a dynasty would do. He went to Harvard to study, and he wanted to become a politician, like the people after him in that dynasty went ahead and did without him. But he soon realized that his passion was actually in what was called primitive art, anthropology, adventuring. He has been quoted to have said, "It's the desire to do something adventurous at a time when frontiers, in a real sense of the word, are disappearing." So, what Michael did, he went to Dutch New Guinea, which is Papua New Guinea now, but it was called that back then. He went there for a few trips to shoot video for a documentary, I think, and take pictures and collect data. One of those tribes who had not been introduced to society was living there. They were called the Asmat, and Michael enjoyed spending time with these wonderful, primitive people. Problem was that they were also known to be in war, constant war with each other and other tribes, and also cannibalism. They had not stopped doing the cannibalism by this point. Like, this was in 1960s. Kinda terrifying that it was going on so late into our modern time, but there we go. Michael, indeed, was there doing his adventuring thing. And he also wanted to collect some primitive art for his father's new museum containing such art. And so, thus, came the fateful day in 1961, when Michael was 23 years old. He and an anthropologist were on a boat which capsized, and they were just out there in Dutch New Guinea in the waters, and they had a feeling they would not get rescued anytime soon. So Michael, he decided that he would swim to land. He put some empty canisters, like water bottles or something, like strapped to him, and started swimming to land. The other person stayed, afraid of doing so, I guess. Ironically, that person was saved a few hours later, but Michael Rockefeller, was never to be seen again. And that is where the mystery begins. An extensive search was going on, of course, because this wasn't just one random guy. This was the guy of one of the greatest and richest families in the world. You can't just have them disappearing like that. So even with this extensive search, nothing of him was ever found. theories are as follows. 1. He drowned. Animal attack. To that, some people say, well, we would have found some parts of him at least if that was the case. And we never did. Nada. Zero. Nothing. Another theory was that he got to land and for some reason decided to start a new life and start living with some a tribe, just for the fun of it, faking his own demise and starting a new life with the tribe that he liked so much, maybe. And the third is that he indeed came onto land and was quickly demised by the tribe's people and consumed. Many things could point to that sad theory. The Hammersmith tribe were known to be eye for an eye, like if someone took one of them, they took one of theirs, and they had been in conflict with the Dutch, and in that conflict some of their tribesmen had been demised. So it's assumed that when they saw this white man coming up on shore, they decided to take him as revenge for that. And another one was when the Rockefeller family sent a private investigator. He came back with 3 skulls that was given to him by the tribe that told him that these were the 3 white people that they had eaten, and that one of them was that Rockefeller guy, even going so far as telling stories about how they found him and did the deed. Even so, there has been no conclusive evidence as to what happened to Michael Rockefeller. We can only assume the worst. Next one. Jesus in Japan. Jesus Christus died in Japan. Yeah, that is a bizarre theory, and it's just marvelous, and I love it so much. Shingo, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I know. It's a small town in the middle of nowhere in Japan, and they have this weird claim to fame. They insist that on or inside of a small hill with a big cross sticking out of it is the last burial site for Jesus Christ himself. Maybe Jesus was the first weeb. Either way, the story goes that for some reason Jesus left Jerusalem and wanted a calmer life and sashayed his way to Japan somehow, where he plopped himself down, became a family man, married someone, got a wife and kids and all that fun jazz. Became a farmer. Every cozy gamer's dream. As a side note to this crazy fan fiction, at some point Jesus decided to return to Jerusalem where they wanted to crucify him, but instead Jesus' brother, who had a very Japanese name for some odd reason, Isukiri, he pretended to be Jesus and took his place and got crucified in his place, so that Jesus Christus could return to Japan and live out his life as a little farmer. Either way, this supposed tomb of Christ is today a tourist trap, and they have yearly festivities to remember and honor Jesus the Weeb. Hallelujah, amen. Let's continue. Now, the real corpse bride. This is an extremely odd, creepy, and terrifying story, if true. I'm not gonna pronounce the name because I'm just bad with that. I'll write it out. Either way, there was a bridal shop, I think maybe it's still there. Either way, in Chihuahua, Mexico. The special thing about this bridal shop was the mannequin that was standing front and center in the window. It looked a little bit too real. Not mannequin-like at all. There was texture. The hands especially, I'm gonna show pictures. They're insane in the detail. When people saw this mannequin, of course, rumors started swirling. Its first appearance in that bridal window was in 1930. And like I said, its very lifelike form and creepy look garnered attention, and many started saying that this was actually the embalmed body of the bridal shop's owner's daughter, who had perished, ironically, at her own wedding from a spider bite from a black widow, and the mourning mother had her embalmed in an extremely good way, I must say, in that case, and placed her in the window, as one does. Mortuary experts today say, no way, Jose. A body, however embalmed, can't just stand in this warm, humid weather and not start decaying or looking worse for wear, so to say. But still to this day, it's very odd, mysterious, and unsolved. We don't know. We can only guess and look at the creepy pictures. Next one. And the last short and sweet one for this episode. The celestial phenomena over Basel, Switzerland in 1566. The thing was that out of nowhere in 1566, and I think in 1561 too, people started noticing weird sunrises and sunsets. That's how it's described anyway. But beyond that, also spheres filling the sky. They were black and red and seemed to be at war with each other. And there's many illustrations from the time of this thing that apparently happened. Modern ufologists say that this was a sky war among spaceships that just so happened to be there in the sky over Switzerland. Some eyewitness reports even tell of them crashing down onto Earth. Some artistic renditions show the same, like that they were actually these black spheres and red things crashing and falling. The people back then assumed that they had something to do with God, like an omen or sign. Even though we have many renditions, both written and illustrated, we still can't explain what the heck actually happened on that day in 1566. And will it ever happen again? I don't know if I'd want to see that. So I vote no. That's all of the oddities and mysteries for this time. Stay tuned for more. Thank you so much for watching, and giant thanks to my lovely Patreons. You're my heroes. If you want to support the channel, find links down below for my Patreon and Ko-fi if you want to leave a tip. And also I have a shop where I make some handmade crafts. So yeah, like and subscribe and comment down below. Stay amazing, stay hydrated, but most of all, stay morbid. Bye bye!